Everything about Freedom Finger, from its cartoon visuals to an offbeat, politically tinged sense of humor, made me feel like I was watching a second to third tier Adult Swim program. It might also be something you stumbled upon inside a heavy metal analog. Piloting a fist-shaped spaceship from which laser bolts blast from the middle finger, you're under orders from Major Cigar, a hackneyed American military stereotype, to fly to the moon and take out Chinese terrorists that have captured a lunar base. The mission isn't an easy one as a result of the hectic and demanding nature of shmup games, specifically those of the bullet hell genre, of which Freedom Finger dips a few toes into. The campaign is told through over 10 different stages, each more visually and thematically absurd than the last, but if you don't want to bother with any of its nonsense, an arcade mode is available that opens up the entire game, letting you play any levels you want, regardless if you haven't reached them in the campaign. In light of its immaturity, weak jokes, and a political axe to grind, Freedom Finger follows the formula of shmups while throwing in a few of its own clever ideas and designs. There are lots of variations to each level, with passages that lead to divergent paths that could house special power-ups, serve as a bypass to avoid enemies and obstacles, or, conversely, lead to trickier and more dangerous routes. The Freedom Finger spaceship itself is a unique craft that engages enemies in two ways. First, as a fist, it can punch weak enemies and space debris, turning them into projectiles that damage other foes. Secondly, it can also grab hold of them, turning like-sized ships into physical projectiles. Other ships, however, grant firepower upgrades after being grabbed, like a blimp that fires a tri-shot or a space eel thing that launches arced shots. You're never told what ships can be used in this manner, as the game encourages you to experiment and see what works and what doesn't. A fine piece of trial and error that would be acceptable only if the sheer number of enemies and complex bullet patterns didn't get in the way. Getting hit by a projectile or simply colliding with enemy ships significantly chips away at your health, and with no checkpoints or lives to spend, death is often brutal and frustrating. Not only do you have to monitor your health, but enemies you fail to shoot down add to a stealth meter that, when filled, ends the game under the pretense that the Chinese terrorists have been alerted to your presence. What separates this game from other gimmicky shmups I've tried in the past, like Ikaruga and Cinemora, is how the soundtrack has been incorporated into the design. Though it collects music from bands I've never heard of, Aesop Rock, Red Fang, Comtrues to name a few, the soundtrack is rather amazing in getting the beats and juices flowing. But they don't just accompany the stages of the game. Rather, levels are built around the songs as enemies appear and behave in time with the song being played. Furthermore, the length of the stage is actually dictated by how long that song lasts. Boss battles flip the script as the big bad must be defeated before the song ends. Other than the music, there's really no way to tell how much further you have to go during a regular level or a boss fight, which significantly wraps up the adrenaline rush. Getting bombarded by a host of weirdly designed opponents and having to dodge their complex bullet patterns is a pretty stressful rush when you have no idea how long it's going to last. Just like Cuphead, the only way to know how far you progressed is to either get to the end of the stage or die and let the game over screen show you how far you progressed. Freedom Finger can be a hard game to play, and I found myself really struggling with the early levels. A reason for this is that it's almost impossible to know what to expect from enemy patterns and how they will attack, especially since most of their movements and actions play against music. There's a lot of trial and error to be gleaned from each stage that, in its worst moments, feel cheap and unfair. It's really easy to feel overwhelmed and incapable of tackling many of the challenges that lie ahead. On the plus side, there are quite a number of accessibility features to adjust the difficulty. For example, you're free to turn off the stealth meter, giving you one less thing to worry about, and reduce the damage taken from enemies. Or you could boost such things in the name of offering up a proper hardcore challenge. Whatever your poison, I'm grateful to Freedom Fighter for taking this approach to customizing the game's experience, and others should be following this example when able. From a presentation standpoint, this game is all over the place. The art style is perfect for such a wacky adventure, looking equal parts a Saturday morning cartoon and a junior high schooler's textbook scribbles come to life. However, there comes a point when some of it just goes too far. Not in any content sense, it's no worse than something you'd find on TV. As much as I absolutely love Nolan North, his performance of Major Cigar is equal parts perfectly hammy and completely obnoxious. Listening him to bark out profanity-laced commands, asides, and aphorisms get old really fast, and no matter how often Sam Riegel chimes in to soothe ruffled feathers, I just couldn't stand listening to him for extended periods of time.
It's called the Eagle Claw. What a sight. Reminds me of an American flag bikini. Patriotic and tantalizing at the same time. Really gets the old red, white, and blues pumping, eh? Now, like my ex-wife's bitchy face, it's made of a highly malleable silicone composite. This material allows the ship to take advantage of upgrades.
Like any episode of South Park, Freedom Finger takes jabs at all sides, preying upon stereotypes to get its jokes through. Major Cigar, and by extension the United States, is depicted as a screaming southern gun nut. A Russian military general named The Comrade appears as a Stalin lookalike with pins attached to his bare, hairy chest and speaks in a movie accent. The characters and the world they inhabit are defined by their sensationalist behaviors that are funny for the first 5 minutes before it gets really grating. I had a much better time in the arcade mode because it strips out all of the annoying cutscenes and offbeat political satire. Speaking of which, in order to show that Freedom Finger has to beat a joke into the ground, there's a Blizzard mode that turns the menu into a piece of Chinese propaganda, where the words freedom are censored. The menu is made up with Chinese characters, and starting the game is nigh impossible because the, quote, Chinese government has censored it. Ha ha, we get it, you're making fun of Blizzard because of its response to the Hong Kong protests. Freedom Finger is best enjoyed when stripped of the jokes that beat themselves over the players' heads, an annoying cast of characters that just can't seem to shut up, and bad political jokes that are tired before they fall flat get in the way of what makes this particular shmup really cook. The soundtrack is fantastic on its own, but the way the levels and enemies engage with the different tracks are really unique and offers its own special challenges that more than pick up the slack left behind what amounts to be a less pointed version of Mad Magazine's style of humor. Darkstation gives Freedom Finger 4 stars.